Peace to the gods and the goddesses of the nation and of the land and of all creation. Hope everybody doing well. Systematic racism. Now, that's a strong word to use. You hear it in such things like the Willie Lynch syndrome with the house nigga and the field nigga, but we have to know that systematic racism has been going on for years and for years and for years. Implanting in the minds of the black man that he's been doing something wrong, when in all actuality, we've been doing shit pretty much right and didn't really need anybody to come over and try to colonialize us because of the way that we was living. They sit up and try to make it look like Africans is some type of savages and beasts, when in all actuality, we are thinkers, we are astronomers, we have mothers, we have fathers, we are a civilization. So this is something that we have to get out, and we have to learn the true meaning of yourself. You have to learn that you are a king and that you are a queen and that you are special, man. And if you don't know that, man, now is the time to figure it out. Now you know. You got somebody telling you this shit. And you got plenty of other scholars out here giving you this information. So there's no reason that you shouldn't even know about it. You should be studying every day. It's time for black people to raise up and start to study and learn about themselves and do things that's going to be in a positive light for them and their families. If we're not doing that, there's no reason why you should be here. If you're not searching for advancement, it's no reason why you should be here. You should be searching for advancement every day of your life, doing something to make yourself better. Not just for you, but for all your kids and their kids and their kids, man. This shit goes on forever. But systematic racism. Now, we may see it, like I said, with the Willie Lynch syndrome, but there is more places that this shit has been placed upon us. It has been placed upon us in our history books. It has been placed upon us in our eardrums from people telling us day in and day not, you just a savage ass nigga. And that's not the case, family. That's not the case for you. That's not the case for me. We are thinkers, man. We are the founders of the world that we know today. Black people have had their hand into every fucking thing that's around and still don't get no credit for it. That's some cornball shit. That shit is corny. I need my respect. But neither here nor there. I just want you to know where systematic racism is coming from, and that it's been around for years upon years. And not just with that Willie Lynch shit. There's also a place that it has even in the evolution theory. There's also places that it has in the French Revolutionary theory. The French Revolutionary, excuse me. And this is what we're going to bring to you today. But in order to know the problem, you have to know the adversary. So let's take a look. And for those who you may wonder, what is evolution? Let's take a look right now.
I'm just scratching the surface. I'm just scratching the surface. I'm just scratching the surface.
In July 1858, The Linnean Society gathered at its new headquarters in London to hear two papers by Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, in which they jointly announced the theory of evolution by natural selection. If you know anything about the history of evolution from natural selection, that is when your organism and the cells inside of your body, they said that it was created. We came from the water and in the whatever the shit was called. And then the organisms is when your organisms, by the environment that they in, have to adapt to that environment. They choose the organisms that they're going to carry on, and they choose the ones that they're not. I'm not going to get too much into it, but I just want you to know the players in the game. Now, evolution wasn't always thought of by Charles Darwin. His dad also had his parts inside of it too, with a host of other revolutionary thinkers at that point in time. But in no means was Charles Darwin the first person to ever do this. Take for instance, let's look at John Baptist Lamarck. He was born August 1st, 1744 in Béziers, Picardy, France. Excuse me if I'm name butchering. Now let's look at this man's history right here. And this will give you the thought on where the thoughts of evolution came from. In 1800, Jean Baptiste Pierre Antoine de Monet Chevalier de Lamarck declared that the fixity of species was an illusion. He proposed that species had not been created in their current form at the dawn of time. New species, he's postulated, had formed through spontaneous generation. As species evolve, they achieve higher and higher levels of complexity. Now, this is just like the thought of what? Natural selection. So now you're learning where this concept is coming from. Now remind you, Charles Darwin, they was in the 1800s to about I believe it maybe was 1858, 1859 when these guys came up with when they presented to the people for the theory of evolution. Here's some more remarks from Lamarck. Lamarck's contribution to evolutionary theory consisted of the first truly cohesive theory of biological evolution, in which an alchemical complexifying force drove organisms up a ladder of complexity, and a second environment force adapted them to local environments through use and disuse characteristics, differentiating them from other organisms. Basically, natural selection, what I just told you, where in that type of environment, they were using the cells in the organisms that they needed at that point in time and disusing the ones that they didn't need. And every environment produced its own organisms. This is basically where the evolution theory is basing, saying that that's its concrete evidence. Now, let's learn about this. Though he was building on the works of his mentor, Count George Louis Leclerc de Buffon, John Baptist Lamarck is often credited with making the first large advance towards modern evolutionary theory. We're going to pause right there, because now we're seeing that even he wasn't the first person that was thinking about the evolutionary theory. Now we see Count George Louis Leclerc is the person who basically inspired him to think about this. Now, I know that I'm taking a little bit of time, but I want you to understand where these concepts of evolution theory came from and where will it land us in understanding the role that systematic ratio came into play. Now, George Louis Leclerc, Comte de Buffon, he was born September 7, 1707 in France. I'm not going to sit up. It's Montbon, Burgundy, France. Excuse me. Now, An important step towards the modern theory of evolution came in the 1760s when Count George Louis Leclerc de Buffon published his Natural Histories of Animals. In this treatise, Buffon described the similarities he found in the limb bones of very different animals. For example, he noticed that dogs have bones in their legs similar to those found in flippers of seals. Now, Buffon's idea that species change over time has become the cornerstone of the modern of evolutionary theory. His technique of comparing similar structures across different species, called comparative anatomy, is used today in the study of evolution and is discussed in evidence of evolution. Let's learn about him. The French naturalist Buffon described the lives of many human groups and tried to demonstrate the material basis for the differences. Mind you, stay with me, I'm just trying to bring you along in history. Every circumstance, he wrote, concurs in proving that mankind are not composed of species essentially different from each other. On the contrary, theirs was originally but one species, who after multiplying and spreading over the whole surface of the earth have undergone various changes by the influence of climate, food, mode of living, epidemic diseases, and mixture of the similar individuals. Here's where we go. Buffon and Johann Blumenbach were believers of what? Monogenism, the concept that all races have a single origin. They also believe in the degeneration theory of racial organisms. They both said that Adam and Eve were Caucasian and that other races came about by degeneration from environmental factors such as the sun and poor diet. They believed that the degeneration could be reversed if proper environmental control was taken, and that all contemporary forms of man could revert to the original Caucasian. Systematic racism. This is what you're seeing exactly right there. Systematic racism. And he wasn't the only person that thought about this. Listen, at this time were Aramis Darwin, the grandfather of Charles Darwin, and Francis Galton, French scientist Georges Louis Leclerc, Comte de Buffon, who we was just talking about, who rejected Christianity and looked for a different explanation for the origin of Earth and its inhabitants. Also, Henry Theory, Baron de Holbelt, we're going to talk about him, who rejected the idea of supernatural organism, and Jean-Baptiste Pierre Antoine, Lamarck, who said new species emerges through spontaneous generation. Now, what does this dude, Baron de Holbach, have to do with this entire situation? Let's find out. Paul Henry Theory, Baron de Holbach, French, was a French-German author, philosopher, encyclopedist, and prominent figure in the French Enlightenment. Mind you, he was born Paul Heinrich Dietrich in Eden, whatever it is, but lived and worked mainly in Paris, where he kept a what? Salon. He was well known for his atheism and for his voluminous writing and religion, the most famous of them being The System of Nature. Now, if this dude right here is well known and he's doing all of this stuff, who is he influence? De Holbach's hard determinism, the system of nature, a human being is a material, evolution thing, all changes in material things are determined by immutable laws. Example given, the laws of what? Science. Here's a chapter from him. Holbach put it well when he wrote. Now, mind you, this is the fathers of evolution. So this is a grand step to show you where these motherfuckers' minds came from and how their thinking was. And even though that they was radical to maybe the government, they was also sick in they fucking brain. Holbach put it well when he wrote, a chain of experiences leads the savage to the stage of civilized society in which he concerns himself with the most sublime of sciences and the most complicated knowledge. Primitive society would, with the passage of time, reach levels of development akin to those of European society. The abolitionist petition de Villeneuve, whatever, saw Africans through the evolutionist prism. Certainly, the African race has not brought its civilization, its industry, its development to the level of Europe, but his assumption was that eventually would Coldesert answer in the affirmative his own radical question: will all the nations one day reach the level of civilization? So basically, this was a basis on the reason of why they came and tried to conquer Africa. They looked at us as beasts, as you see here, savages, primitive, who couldn't even have order within themselves, while not knowing that Africa had civilizations at that time that were greater than them. Baron D. Holbach used his wealth to what? Maintain one of the more notable and lavish Parisian saloons, which soon became an important meeting place for the contributors to the encyclopedia. Meetings were held regularly twice a week on Sundays and Thursdays in D. Holbach's home in Rue Royale. Visitors to the salon were exclusively males, and the tone of discussions highbrow, often extending to topics more extensive than those of other saloons. This, along with the excellent food, expensive wine, and a library of over 3,000 volumes, attracted many notable visitors. Now, who is the encyclopedia? We know what it is, but what do they have to do with it? The French better known as encyclopedia, was a general encyclopedia published in France between 1751 and 1772, with later supplements, revived editions, and translations. It had many writers, known as the encyclopedists. It was edited by Denis Diderot, and until 1958 co-edited by Jean-Laurent d'Alembert. The encyclopedists were members of the Société des Gens Lettres, a French writer society who contributed to the development of the encyclopedia from June 1751 to December 1765, under the editors of Denis Diderot and d'Alembert. Listen. The composition of the 17 volumes of text and 11 volumes of plates of the encyclopedia was the work of over 150 authors, belonging in large part to the intellectual group known as the philosophies. So you had the main players in the French Revolution at this point of time holding these type of feelings towards Africans. So as we see here, it says, on every Thursday and Sunday, 12 guests, not always the same, would meet at the salon from 2 o'clock to 7 or 8 at night. Regulars at the salon included Diderot, who we just learned about, Helvetius, d'Alembert, Rano, Boulanger, Morellet, Saint Lambert, Mark Montel, and occasionally Buffin, who we just explained, Turgot, and Quinsnay. Others who attended the salon included a bunch of others who was trapped in the same mind frame as the mother niggas. You get what I'm saying to you? But I want you to know that in the frame of mind of these people, of what they looked at Africans as. Take for instance, your boy Boulanger. Nicolas Antoine Boulanger was an Enlightenment French philosopher, cartographer, and engineer. Boulanger has some influence in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Syriac, and Chaldean. Now, he was also the author of this book that I'm about to show you called The Origin of Despotism. Now, I'm going to just give you a couple of little chapters of this book so you could see where the mind frame of these people was, who was sitting up here revered and looked to as the smartest people in the world. What they thought about you, what they had in their mind about you. Page 4. Let me move my camera over a little bit so I can see everything, so I can give y'all the whole thing. This strange despotism of Asiatic minds, and trust and believe, when they're talking about Asiatic, they're talking about you, people of dark skin complexion. In this miserable condition of the finest part of the world hath extremely affected in all times philosophers, historians, and travelers. There are but a few of them who have not endeavored to account in some manner for it, and to trace it upon to its source, whether in the moral or the physical causes of the climate. And I want people to know, when he's talking about climate, he's not just talking about as in the hot weather that was in Africa. Climate at that time meant the state and mind of that person at that time. But a greater number have made researches in their imagination only, unfurnished with the knowledge requisite to resolve and unfold so difficult and so interesting a problem. Whatever may be the power of climates upon the different inhabitants of this earth, we may be certain, for instance, that there is no physical influence which can extinguish in a man his natural perception in regard to his own immediate interests, unless education and prejudice cooperate by imposing on him from his infancy false principles in regard to his real happiness and the true duties of life. Every object impresses on the mind of a young Asiatic that he is a slave and ought to be so. The European learns from everything around him that he is the rational being. The American sees and feels that he is a free agent. Do you understand what they're saying about you? They're saying that they have to indoctrinate you, that you are nothing but a slave. If this ain't the Willie Lynch syndrome, I don't know what it is. And for you black scholars who sitting up here holding on to this evolution theory, you want to follow behind a man who thought that of you? A man who saw you as a primitive being, a savage, an animal that was in this earth, whose only reason to be on this earth was a slave? Many have likewise fought for the secret cause of this government in the national disposition which people from form to receive their climate that qualifies them to more or less to know the value of their existence and to be more or less sensible of their own interests. History exhibits Eurus to us as always brave, ever jealous of her liberty. She, on the contrary, wherewith Asia to us at all times immersed in indolence and thraldom, it appeared thence not unnatural to attribute to the client effects so constant and successive. The uniformity of the character of those different nations, let me calm down, that have succeeded each other from age to age, and two distant parts of the world seeming to confirm this idea, induce inquirers to think that the climate of one produced free man, and that the climate of the other could never give birth to any but two slaves. Do you see what he thought of us as? He thought of us as nothing but slaves. And these are the founders of the groups that wrote the encyclopedia in France, who also inspired Charles Darwin, who is the father of modern day evolution, to think that look at the mind frame of these people at that time and what they thought of you. Some were of opinion that in order to come at the primitive causes of this degradation, talking about calling you a degradation of a white man, of the human nature, it was necessary to remount to barbarous ages when mankind, wondering and timid, submitted themselves to the stronger, some first through choice and others afterwards through force. Do you understand? He's justifying beating and destroying our race. He's justifying saying that the primitive ways, they considered Africans animals. So he's basically saying to his people, the primitive ways of these animals, they only gonna respect force. So we have to use the old terms of using barbarous ways, means torture, pillage, everything, in order to get these people to convert to our life and our thinking. They who adopted this opinion appear not to have sufficiently considered that during such a savage state of life, such a revolution was the less likely to take place, because in such an age and the value of liberty ought to have been more known and better felt, as it was then the only possession of mankind. How then could they suffer themselves to be despoiled thereof? Come on, bruh. Look at the mind frame of these people, man. Look at the mind frame of these people. These people conspired to conquer an entire land. To not only conquer it, but to take the inhabitants of that land as slaves. And they felt in their heart and their mind that this was the right way. They felt that in their mind they had to colonize Africans to conform to being slaves. Why would I believe anything that you saying to me about an evolution if I know that the whole reason of you even talking to me is to get me to convert to the way and life that you set for me, which is a slave? You don't care about me. All you want me to do is to do your bidding and to control me. How can you, as an evolution theory person, evolutionist, whatever you want to call yourself, believe anything that can possibly come out these men's mouth when I just showed you proof right here that they conspired in their salon to enslave you and to psychologically damage you? So the only way you thought of yourself was a slave. And this is not just something that was even with them. If you, I'm not going to show it to you, but I'm just going to tell you. I want you to go look it up for yourself. If you look at the influencers of these men that I just told you about, who is they influence? Aristotle, Plato, Socrates. The same people who went and pillaged Egypt, took our ideas and took our thought processes, flipped it around and act like they made it. Know who you're following.
I'm just scratching the surface.
Remember, all these gonna be on slides. You're gonna see them at the same time. And until then, man, peace and blessings, man, to the gods and the goddesses of the nation. Learn what you follow. Learn the thought of the people that you follow and why they gave this to you. They gave this to you so you can feel less human. So you could be at the bottom of the totem pole. They gave it to you to enslave you. And you following right into their trap, bro.
I'm just scratching.
But for those who don't, peace and blessings to the gods and the goddesses of the nation and of the land and of all creation. And I'll see you guys next time.